My mother-in-law called my unborn child a mistake. She struck me in the stomach in front of 50 guests. And then I handed her the envelope. 3 seconds later, she was on the floor, unconscious. But what was inside that envelope? That's what nobody expected. Welcome to Tea and Payback, where the tea is hot, the secrets are messy, and karma always finds her way home. Before I go on, just a quick reminder. I share new life stories every day. If you enjoy them, subscribing and liking the video would mean a lot to me. Now sit down, pour yourself a cup of tea, let's continue. My name is Diana. I'm 32 years old. I work as a forensic accountant for a mid-sized construction firm here in Dallas. And if you'd told me 5 years ago that I'd be the reason a powerful businesswoman lost everything, her empire, her freedom, her family, I would have laughed in your face. But here we are, and I'd do it again. Let me take you back to where it started. Not to the night she collapsed. Not to the moment I found the documents. But to the very beginning, when I was just a girl who wanted love and didn't know it would cost me everything I believed about family. I grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment in Oak Cliff. My father, Robert, teaches advanced mathematics at a community college. My mother, Linda, teaches ethics and philosophy at the same school. We didn't have much. Our furniture came from thrift stores. Our vacations were camping trips to state parks. But we had something else. Integrity. My parents taught me that your word means something, that honesty isn't negotiable, that wealth without character is just expensive emptiness. I carried those values into adulthood. I got my degree in accounting, found a decent job, and spent my weekends at coffee shops and art galleries with friends. I wasn't looking for a rich man. I was looking for a real one. Then I met Adrian. He was standing in front of a sculpture at the Dallas Museum of Art, explaining color theory to his buddy like he was lecturing a class. I was eavesdropping, I'll admit it. His voice had this confidence, this warmth. When he turned and caught me listening, he didn't get embarrassed. He smiled. We talked for 4 hours that day. About art, about architecture, about everything. Adrian was an architect working for one of the biggest firms downtown. He was brilliant, funny, and he looked at me like I was the only person in the room. We dated for almost a year before he ever mentioned his mother in detail. Before that, she was just a name, a shadow in the background. One night, walking through Clyde Warren Park, he finally said it. My mother isn't easy. She has very specific ideas about what my life should look like, and who should be in it. I laughed it off. I can handle a tough mother-in-law. God, I was naive. The first time I met Lorraine Ashford, I thought I'd walked into a museum by mistake. Her house, no, her estate, sat behind iron gates in Highland Park, all stone and glass and manicured hedges. There was a fountain in the circular driveway. A fountain. I grew up in an apartment where we shared one bathroom. Lorraine met us in the foyer. She was tall, mid-50s, with silver hair styled into a perfect wave. She wore a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than my car. Her eyes were pale blue and cold as lake ice. So this is Diana, she said. Not a question. A diagnosis. I extended my hand. She touched my fingertips for half a second, then pulled back like I'd burned her. Dinner was worse. The dining room had a chandelier that looked like it belonged in Versailles. Every question Lorraine asked was a trap. Where did I go to school? A state university. What did my parents do? Professors at a community college. Where did we live? A modest apartment. With every answer, her lips pressed tighter. When Adrian stepped out to take a call, she leaned forward. You understand, Diana, my son could have chosen anyone. He comes from a distinguished family. I always imagined him with someone from our world. I tried to smile. I hope we can find common ground, Mrs. Ashford. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. We'll see. Love is charming, but marriage requires so much more. Adrian apologized the entire drive home. She just needs time. She's protective. But time didn't help. If anything, Lorraine got worse. She owned a chain of high-end day spas across Dallas, places where facials cost $300 and memberships required referrals. She sat on the boards of 3 major charities. Her picture appeared in society magazines. She was Dallas royalty, and I was the peasant who'd infiltrated the castle. Every family dinner became a performance. Lorraine would talk endlessly about Isabel Kincaid, the daughter of her best friend who owned a chain of luxury hotels. Isabel had studied in Paris, spoke 4 languages, and looked like a runway model. She was everything I wasn't. Isabel just returned from Milan, Lorraine would announce, ignoring me entirely. She's so refined now. And Patricia says she's still single. Can you imagine? Adrian would tense, trying to steer the conversation elsewhere. But Lorraine was relentless. She'd spend an hour listing Isabel's accomplishments, every word a knife aimed at me. When we'd run into Isabel at charity events, Lorraine staged it like a Broadway show. Diana works in accounting, she'd say, her tone dripping with disdain. And Isabel oversees international acquisitions for her family's hotel group. That requires vision. Isabel would smile uncomfortably. I could tell she hated the comparisons. She seemed nice enough, but talking to her was like chewing cardboard. All she discussed was designer brands, luxury resorts, and who was dating whom in Dallas high society. But Lorraine didn't care about substance. She cared about status. 18 months into our relationship, Adrian proposed. We were on the rooftop of his office building, watching the skyline turn gold at sunset. He pulled out a small velvet box. "Diana, you make me feel like myself. Marry me." I said yes without hesitation. When we told Lorraine, her face went rigid. "Congratulations," she said, her voice flat. "Adrian, I need to speak with you privately." They were in her study for over an hour. I heard raised voices through the door. When Adrian came out, he was pale. "Mom thinks we're rushing." "And what did you say?" "That I love you. And we're getting married." But Lorraine sabotaged everything. We wanted a small ceremony. She insisted on a lavish affair. We chose a simple venue. She booked the most expensive hotel ballroom, then canceled it 2 days before the wedding. We hired a photographer. She brought her own, who shot every picture so I was barely visible. On our wedding day, she wore black. She sat stone-faced through the entire reception, gave no toast, and told guests she was concerned about Adrian's future. We moved into my 1-bedroom apartment after the wedding. Adrian wanted something bigger, but I insisted we save for a house. Lorraine called it a slum. She'd show up unannounced, criticizing everything. Once, I found her in our bedroom, going through my closet. "I wanted to see what conditions my son is living in," she said, like it was perfectly reasonable. Then I got pregnant. Adrian was ecstatic. He started reading parenting books, cooking me breakfast, coming to every doctor's appointment. I thought maybe, just maybe, Lorraine would soften. This was her grandchild, her legacy. But when we told her, she looked at me with pure contempt. "A baby," she said slowly. "In that apartment, on your salaries. Adrian, do you realize what you've taken on?" "We'll manage, Mom." "Manage." She spat the word. "My grandchild will not live in poverty. Though with a mother like that, I don't know what else to expect." Adrian squeezed my shoulder. "Mom, don't. I'm speaking the truth. If you'd married Isabel, you'd have a home already, a secure future. What do you have now? You're living paycheck to paycheck." Every month of the pregnancy, it got worse. Lorraine bought baby things, then said in front of guests, "These aren't the brands I dreamed of for my grandchild, but one must adjust to the parent's level." She invited us to family dinners with her society friends and humiliated me every time. Diana's never been to Europe. Adrian took her to an all-inclusive resort in Mexico, and she thought that was international travel. Adrian tried to defend me, but Lorraine was a master manipulator. She'd clutch her chest, complain about her heart, take a pill dramatically. Adrian would cave, apologize, beg me to be patient. "She's my mother, Diana. Just give her time." But time only made it worse. In my 6th month, I saw something I wasn't supposed to see. Lorraine had left her phone at our apartment after one of her surprise inspections. The screen lit up with a text from Isabel Kincaid. "Don't worry, Lorraine. I'm certain this marriage won't last. Adrian will realize his mistake. I'll be ready." I stared at the message for a long time. My mother-in-law wasn't just rejecting me. She was actively working to destroy my marriage. That's when I decided. I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't beg. I would be smarter. A week later, I was at Lorraine's estate for another torturous family dinner. I excused myself to use the restroom. Walking past her home office, I noticed the door was cracked open. Usually it was locked. I paused. Something pulled me to the threshold. On her desk sat an open folder. Financial documents. I saw the name of one of her spas and columns of numbers. My accountant brain kicked in automatically. The numbers didn't match. The internal reports showed revenue 3 times higher than the official tax documents. My heart pounded. I knew what I was looking at. This was fraud. This was felony tax evasion. I pulled out my phone. My hands shook as I photographed page after page. I put everything back exactly as I'd found it and walked out before anyone noticed. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at those photos until my eyes burned. I spent the next week consulting with a tax attorney, a friend of my father's. I showed him the photos. His verdict was immediate. If these are real, she's looking at serious prison time. We're talking millions in unpaid taxes. This isn't a mistake. This is organized fraud. I gathered more evidence slowly, carefully. Lorraine was so arrogant, so confident in her untouchability, that she didn't bother hiding her tracks. She had connections, powerful friends. She thought she was above the law, but she wasn't above me. And I had proof. I didn't tell Adrian. He loved his mother despite everything. It would destroy him, but I made a promise to myself. If she humiliated me one more time, I'd use everything I had. In my 7th month, Lorraine invited us to a charity gala at her estate. She said it was important, that influential people would be there, that she wanted the whole family present. I didn't want to go. I was exhausted. My feet were swollen. My back ached. But Adrian begged. She's trying, Diana. Please. The mansion was packed. Dallas elite. Business moguls. Politicians. Lorraine glided through the crowd, radiant, accepting compliments like a queen. I sat in a corner, feeling invisible in my simple black maternity dress. Every other woman wore designer gowns and jewelry that could have paid off my student loans. About an hour in, Lorraine approached with 3 of her friends. Polished, judgmental women with cold smiles. Diana, darling, Lorraine cooed. Meet my closest friends. Margaret, Claudia, and Simone. Ladies, this is my son's wife. They looked me over like I was livestock. Lorraine told us so much about you, one said. She mentioned you come from a very humble background. My parents are professors, I said evenly. Oh, how noble, another woman purred. Though not the most lucrative field. Lorraine smiled. Diana works as an accountant at a construction company. Adrian could support the family entirely, but Diana insists on working. So independent. The sarcasm was thick enough to cut. I believe it's important for a woman to have her own income, I said. Of course, Lorraine waved dismissively. You know, ladies, I always thought Adrian would marry someone from our circle. I had the perfect candidate, Isabel Kincaid. Remember how lovely they looked together at that fundraiser 3 years ago? Oh yes, one friend chimed in. Isabel is still single. Such a beautiful girl. Fury rose in my chest, but I stayed silent. My nails dug into my palms. But what can one do? Lorraine sighed theatrically. Youth. Hormones. Adrian didn't listen. Now they live in a cramped apartment, counting pennies, expecting a baby. I just hope the child is healthy, though with those genetics. She didn't finish, but the implication hung in the air like poison. Something inside me snapped. Mrs. Ashford, I said quietly. I understand you think I'm unworthy of your son. You've made that clear. But I'm asking you not to insult my unborn child. The room went silent. Guests stopped talking. Adrian heard the shift and started toward us. Insult. Lorraine feigned shock. I'm expressing concern. Children inherit their parents' limitations. Their social standing. It's statistics, dear. Mom, stop. Adrian reached us, seeing my pale face. I'm educating your wife about reality, Adrian. The reality that a child born into poverty to a mother of questionable background is unlikely to achieve much. It's just facts. Stop it now, Adrian raised his voice. More heads turned. But Lorraine couldn't stop. Years of venom poured out. You married a gold digger, Adrian. She and her little family latched onto you for money, for connections. You're too blind to see it. And now she's going to give you a child just as worthless as. She swung her hand and struck me across the stomach. Sharp, searing pain. I doubled over, clutching my abdomen, and fell. Gasps erupted. Someone screamed. Adrian lunged toward me, but I was already pushing myself up, gripping the edge of a table. Slowly, I straightened. I looked at my mother-in-law. Her face was twisted with rage, her chest heaving. And I calmly reached into the pocket of my dress. I pulled out the envelope. The envelope I'd been carrying for 2 weeks, waiting for this exact moment. I extended it to Lorraine. "This is for you," I said. My voice was steady, cold. "I think you'll find it interesting." She snatched it, tore it open, and pulled out the documents. I watched the color drain from her face, watched her eyes widen, watched her hands tremble. Inside were copies of the IRS audit notice, copies of the federal complaint for felony tax evasion in the amount of $2.8 million, and copies of her fraudulent accounting records, the ones I'd photographed in her office. "You," she whispered. "How dare you?" But she never finished. The documents fell from her hands. She stumbled backward and collapsed onto the marble floor, unconscious. Chaos erupted. Someone called 911. Lorraine's friends hovered over her body, shrieking. Adrian looked at me, confusion and shock in his eyes. But I stood there calmly, one hand on my stomach where she'd struck me. For the first time in 3 years, I felt powerful. The paramedics arrived within minutes. They revived Lorraine, checked her vitals. When she opened her eyes, the first thing she did was look at me. Pure hatred. "You," she croaked, trying to sit up. The paramedics held her down. Guests were leaving, whispering, pulling out phones. The charity gala had turned into the scandal of the season. Adrian took my hand. "We're leaving. Now." In the car, heavy silence. Adrian's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. "What was that, Diana?" he finally asked. "What documents did you give her?" I took a deep breath. "Your mother has been running fraudulent books in her spas. She's been evading taxes for years. I found the evidence 2 months ago. I filed a complaint with the IRS." Adrian slammed the brakes, pulled over, turned to me. "What have you done?" His voice shook. "That's my mother. How could I?" I felt fury surge. "Adrian, your mother just struck me in the stomach. I'm 7 months pregnant. She called me worthless, said our child would be a failure. And you're asking how I could report a crime. Diana, that's justice." I cut him off. "She broke the law for years, cheated the government. I provided evidence. That's my civic duty. That was revenge. That was self-defense. Adrian, I endured 3 years of humiliation. I stayed silent when she compared me to other women, when she sabotaged our wedding, when she called our home a slum. I swallowed all of it for you. But when she raised her hand against our child, I had every right to protect us." Adrian stared out the windshield, jaw working. "You should have told me. And you would have asked me not to hurt your mother. You would have begged for another chance. You've given her chances your whole life. She still treats people like dirt." He turned sharply. "She's my mother. And I'm your wife. This is our child." I placed my hand on my belly. "Who do you choose? The woman who just assaulted your pregnant wife, or your family?" The silence stretched forever. I watched him struggle, torn between duty and love. Finally, he exhaled. "Let's go home." We drove in silence. At home, Adrian went straight to the shower. I sat on the couch, trembling. My phone showed 20 missed calls, all from Lorraine and her relatives. I silenced it. When Adrian emerged, he looked exhausted. He sat beside me. "I need time to process this." "I understand," I said. "But know this. I don't regret what I did. If I had to choose again, I'd do the same thing. Protecting my family from toxicity is the right thing to do." That night, we slept on opposite sides of the bed. I couldn't sleep. The evening replayed in my mind. My hand rested on my stomach, feeling the baby kick. "Everything will be fine," I whispered. "I'll protect you from everyone." The next morning, my mother called. One of the guests knew my parents and had already spread the news. "Diana, what happened?" My mother Linda's voice was anxious. Sandra called. She said there was a terrible scene. I told her everything. Mom listened, occasionally gasping. "My daughter," she said when I finished, "you did the right thing. No one has the right to lay hands on a pregnant woman. And reporting her fraud isn't revenge. It's upholding the law." Dad got on the phone. You showed real courage, Diana. Not every woman could stand up for herself like that. Their support calmed me. 3 days later, investigators came. 2 federal agents with a search warrant. They raided Lorraine's mansion, confiscating computers, documents, flash drives, notebooks. Everything was filmed. Lorraine sat on her couch, pale, looking 20 years older. When the agents left, she called Adrian. He put it on speaker. Adrian, my son, I need help. Your wife set me up. This is lies. I need a lawyer. I need money. Mom, I can't. How can you not? I'm your mother. I gave birth to you, raised you, gave you everything. Mom, you struck my pregnant wife. You called her vile names in public. And you genuinely broke the law. This is your responsibility. Adrian. Her voice went hysterical. You're choosing this cheap girl over your own mother? I'm choosing my family. Don't call me again. He hung up. His hands shook. I hugged him. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm sorry I didn't protect you sooner. You're not weak. You just love your mother. But loving someone means letting them face consequences. The following weeks were brutal. Adrian's relatives attacked us. Calls, messages, all demanding I drop the complaint, accusing me of destroying the family. His Aunt Patricia drove to our apartment, pounding on the door. Come out, Snake. You ruined your mother-in-law's life. I called the police, filed a harassment report. The visits stopped, but the online attacks began. Someone posted my photo on social media. This woman reported her mother-in-law to the police. Comments poured in, some supportive. Others called me cruel and calculating. Adrian deleted his accounts. I made mine private. We hid from the world, protecting our small island of peace. I saw my doctor regularly. After that blow to my stomach, I was terrified something was wrong with the baby. The baby's fine, Diana, the doctor assured me. Heartbeat is excellent. Development on track. But you need rest. Avoid stress. Easy to say when your mother-in-law is under federal investigation and you're the key witness. A month after the raid, Lorraine was questioned. Her lawyer was with her, but it didn't help. The investigation revealed her fraud was even more extensive than I'd thought. She'd underreported revenue, paid employees under the table, used shell companies. The total loss to the government exceeded $2.8 million. This wasn't a mistake. This was organized crime. Lorraine was released on bail, but couldn't leave Dallas. Authorities froze her accounts. Her assets were seized. News spread fast. Newspapers ran stories. TV covered it. Her society friends distanced themselves. We had no idea, they said. She seemed so respectable. We're shocked. Hypocrisy at its finest. Lorraine tried contacting Adrian through her lawyer, sending messages. She wanted to meet, talk, explain. Adrian refused. He'd made his choice. It wasn't easy. I saw how much he suffered. At night, he'd wake up, sit in the kitchen, stare into darkness. One night, I found him there at 3 a.m., holding cold coffee. Can't sleep. I sat beside him, thinking about Mom. She wasn't always like this. When I was a kid, she was caring. Dad died when I was 12. Mom built that business from nothing. I guess something broke in her then. She became obsessed with money, with status. Hard circumstances don't justify cruelty, Adrian. I took his hand. Your mother made choices. She chose to break the law. She chose to humiliate people. She chose money over human dignity. I know. Rationally, I get it. But she's still my mother. Loving her doesn't mean letting her destroy your life. It doesn't mean sacrificing your family for her ego. He nodded, but I could see it was still hard. The investigation continued. I was questioned several times as a witness. I recounted finding the documents, what I saw, how I gathered evidence. Lorraine's lawyer tried to discredit me, claiming I acted out of revenge, that I'd illegally entered her office, violated her privacy. My attorney deflected easily. My client lawfully discovered evidence of a crime while present in her mother-in-law's home as a family member. She fulfilled her civic duty by reporting it. No illegal acts occurred. Gradually, my fear faded. I realized I'd done the right thing. The law was on my side. And most importantly, Adrian was with me. He'd changed during those months. He became tougher, more confident. When colleagues gossiped about his mother, he'd say directly, "My mother broke the law. She'll face the penalty she deserves. That honesty commanded respect. The gossip died down. I went on maternity leave in my 8th month. Everything was fine. Adrian and I set up a nursery corner in our small apartment. Crib, stroller, clothes. Not luxury brands, but quality. My parents came to help. They were thrilled about their granddaughter. At the last ultrasound, we learned it was a girl. Adrian wanted to name her Sophie. I agreed. A beautiful name. A week before my due date, I was summoned by prosecutors. The case was going to trial. They wanted to clarify details of my testimony. I went with Adrian. He wouldn't let me go alone. We were in the waiting area when I saw her. Lorraine walked out of an office with her lawyer. She'd aged terribly. Gray hair, gaunt face, shadows under her eyes. Her expensive suit hung loose. She'd lost weight. Our eyes met. Her gaze held such hatred, such pain. I instinctively turned away, covering my stomach. "Adrian," she called out. Her voice was broken. Adrian stood. "Mom. Son, please. You have to help. Talk to her. Make her drop the complaint. Please. I'll do anything. Mom, it's too late. The case is going to trial. But she can say she made a mistake. That she misunderstood. Mom, you ran fraudulent books. That's a fact. The prosecution has all the evidence." Lorraine stepped toward us. Her lawyer tried to stop her, but she broke free. "This is all her fault." She jabbed a finger at me. "That wretched girl ruined my life. I hope you regret ever." "Mrs. Ashford, please." The lawyer grabbed her elbow. "You're making it worse." Adrian stepped forward, shielding me. "Mom, leave. Now." The steel in his voice surprised even me. Lorraine recoiled, spun around, and shuffled toward the exit, hunched and broken. I exhaled. My hands shook. "It's okay." Adrian put his arm around me. "She can't hurt you anymore." The questioning went quickly. I confirmed my statements, signed protocols. The prosecutor said the trial was scheduled for the following month. "You'll be needed as a witness, but given your condition, the court may allow video testimony." "I want to be there in person," I said firmly. "If the baby hasn't arrived by then." Adrian squeezed my hand. Labor started 2 days early. I woke with sharp contractions. We called 911. I was taken to the hospital. Adrian stayed by my side the entire time, holding my hand, wiping sweat from my forehead, encouraging me. Labor lasted 8 hours. But when I heard our daughter's first cry, I forgot the pain. "A girl," the midwife announced. 7 pounds, 9 ounces. 20 inches. Healthy and beautiful. They placed her on my chest. Tiny. Wrinkled. Perfect. "Sophie," I whispered. "Our little Sophie." Adrian kissed my forehead, my cheeks, my hands. Tears streamed down his face. "Thank you," he kept saying. "Thank you." My parents came in. Mom cried with joy. Dad couldn't stop staring at his granddaughter. "She looks just like you at that age," Mom said. I thought about Lorraine's curse. That child will be a disgrace. And here she was, perfectly healthy, beautiful, no curses, only love. Adrian decided not to tell his mother about Sophie's birth. "I don't want her to know. Not until the trial is over." I understood. Lorraine might use the news for manipulation, to guilt-trip Adrian. We didn't need that. The trial began a month after Sophie was born. I was breastfeeding, so I brought the baby. My mother came to stay with Sophie in the hallway while I testified. The courtroom was packed. Journalists everywhere. The case was high-profile. Lorraine's relatives sat in front rows, glaring at me. I stood straight, not lowering my gaze. Lorraine sat at the defense table with her lawyer. Dark suit, hair in a severe bun. She tried to look dignified, but I could see her hands trembling. The judge read the charges. Long list. Tax evasion on a massive scale. Unlawful business practices. Document forgery. Each count carried up to 6 years. Witness questioning began. Spa employees testified first. They described receiving cash envelopes, being told to stay silent during inspections, how real revenue was triple the official amount. Then the IRS investigator testified, explaining the fraud in detail, showing documents, comparing figures. Then it was my turn. I walked to the witness stand, placed my hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth. Sat down. The prosecutor asked clear, direct questions. I I recounted discovering the documents, exactly what I saw, how I consulted an attorney, gathered evidence. "What was your motivation for reporting this?" the prosecutor asked. I looked directly at Lorraine. "I was protecting my family. The defendant systematically humiliated me, insulted me, tried to destroy my marriage. The culmination was when she physically assaulted me, a 7-month pregnant woman, in the abdomen and cursed my unborn child. At that moment, I realized I couldn't tolerate it anymore. I used the only lawful means I had." Lorraine's lawyer jumped up. "Objection. The witness is justifying personal revenge." "Overruled," the judge said calmly. "The witness's motivation doesn't change the fact that the defendant committed crimes. Proceed." The defense attorney began cross-examination, trying to find contradictions. But I was prepared. I answered clearly, without emotion, relying on facts. "You entered the defendant's private office without permission." "I was in my mother-in-law's home as a family member at her invitation. The office door was open. I accidentally saw documents on the desk." "You photographed private papers." "I photographed documents containing evidence of a crime. Every citizen is obligated to report crimes." The lawyer changed tactics, but I stayed firm. Finally, the judge dismissed me. I returned to the hallway where my mother held Sophie. The baby slept peacefully. I picked her up, held her close. This was my reward, my reason to fight. The trial lasted 3 days. Experts, accountants, more witnesses. The picture was complete and damning. Lorraine had cheated the government for years, stealing millions that should have gone to schools, hospitals, roads. At the final session, Lorraine took the stand. She stood rigid. "I admit I made mistakes in running my business." Her voice was firm but bitter. "But I will never forgive the one who ruined my life out of revenge. That woman," she nodded toward me. "She infiltrated my family, deceived my son, destroyed my business, my reputation. Now she plays the heroine. But I know the truth. She's a calculating, cold-blooded snake." The judge banged his gavel. "Defendant, stick to the subject. Your personal relationships have no bearing on this case." Lorraine sat down, lips pressed tight. The judge retired for deliberation. We waited nearly 2 hours. Finally, the verdict. The defendant is found guilty of felony tax evasion on multiple counts. Sentencing is determined to be 4 years in a federal correctional facility. The defendant is ordered to pay restitution to the government in the amount of $2.8 million. The defendant's assets will remain frozen until the debt is satisfied. Lorraine turned pale. Her relatives jumped up, shouting. Security called for order. The lawyer spoke to his client, but she wasn't listening. She just stared into nothing. I stood and headed for the exit. Adrian put his arm around my shoulders. My mother pushed Sophie's stroller. We walked out amid camera flashes and journalists' shouts. "Diana, are you satisfied with the verdict? Do you plan to reconcile with your mother-in-law? Do you regret your actions?" I stopped and turned toward the cameras. "Justice has prevailed," I said. "I regret nothing." And we walked on without looking back. 6 months passed. Lorraine was serving her sentence somewhere upstate. Adrian and I tried not to think about her, to live our lives, raise our daughter. Sophie was an incredible baby. Calm, cheerful, curious. At 5 months, she rolled over. At 6, she sat up with support. The doctor said her development was excellent. Every time I looked at her healthy, rosy face, I remembered Lorraine's curse and smiled. No wicked words had power over our little girl. Adrian and I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment. We rented, didn't buy. The price stretched our budget, but we needed more space. One room became the nursery. The other, our bedroom. Small kitchen, single bathroom. Nothing extravagant, but it was ours. Clean of toxic memories. I started working remotely. My company allowed me to handle reports from home, consulting with colleagues online. This let me stay with Sophie and still earn income. Adrian got promoted. He was managing a department now. His salary increased, but we still lived modestly, saving every month. "We're saving for that down payment," Adrian would say, browsing apartment listings. "Another year and we can get a mortgage." My parents helped as much as they could. Mom visited several times a week, watching Sophie while I worked. Dad brought groceries, fixed things, played with his granddaughter. Their support meant everything. We tried not to mention Lorraine, but sometimes it was impossible. Aunt Patricia, Lorraine's sister, kept calling Adrian, demanding he visit his mother in prison. Adrian, she's your mother. How can you abandon her in a place like that? Aunt Patricia, Mom chose her path. I'm not obligated to pay for her crimes. But she's suffering. She lost everything. She lost what she earned dishonestly. And she nearly harmed my pregnant wife. I'm sorry, but I've made my choice. After such calls, Adrian would be gloomy all evening. I saw how hard it was, but he stood firm. I was proud of him. Lorraine's property sold at auction. The mansion went to a tech entrepreneur. Her cars went to collectors. Antiques, paintings, furniture, all sold. The money went to pay her debt and fines. The spas were sold to another chain. New owners rebranded everything. There was no trace left of Lorraine's empire. Sophie turned 1. We held a small celebration at our apartment. Just close people. My parents, 2 of Adrian's friends with their wives, my childhood friend. We baked a cake, blew up balloons, gave Sophie developmental toys. She laughed, clapped her hands, tried to blow out the candle. Look what a beauty she's become, Mom said, kissing her granddaughter. Our clever girl. Adrian put his arm around me. We made it. We did, I agreed. But deep down, I knew it wasn't over. Lorraine was due for release in 3.5 years. What then? Would she try to re-enter our lives? The answer came sooner than expected. 18 months after the trial, when Sophie was 1.5 years old, Aunt Patricia called. Adrian, your mother is getting out on early release for good behavior. She needs a place to live. Next week. Long silence. Adrian gripped the phone so hard his knuckles turned white. And what are you suggesting? She can't return to her house. It was sold. She has no money for rent. Adrian, she's your mother. You have to take her in. No, he said firmly. How can you say no? You're going to turn your own mother out onto the street. She can live with you or with other relatives. But not with us. That's final. Aunt Patricia screamed into the phone, but Adrian hung up. Are you sure? I asked. He looked at me, then at Sophie playing with blocks on the carpet. Absolutely. I won't let her into our daughter's life. I don't want Sophie growing up under that toxic influence. Mom never apologized. Never admitted she was wrong. She still sees herself as the victim. People like that don't change. We lived in tension for a week, expecting Lorraine to contact us. But there were no calls. Then I saw her. Sophie and I were walking in a park near our apartment. Beautiful autumn day. Golden leaves, warm sun. Sophie ran along the paths, collecting acorns, laughing. I walked beside her, holding her hand. Suddenly, I saw a familiar figure on a bench. Lorraine. She looked completely different. Aged, stooped, wearing a cheap jacket and faded jeans. Her hair was cut short gray. Her face was lined with deep wrinkles. Nothing remained of the majestic woman she'd been. Our eyes met. She rose from the bench, took a step toward us. Diana. I stopped, instinctively pulling Sophie close. My daughter buried her face in my leg, sensing my tension. Mrs. Ashford. She looked at Sophie with a hungry, painful gaze. Is that my granddaughter? No. This is my daughter. Adrian won't see me. He won't answer the phone. I tried coming to your apartment, but the doorman wouldn't let me in. He made the right choice. Lorraine took another step. Please. I just want to see her. She's my blood. You lost the right to call her yours the moment you struck me when I was pregnant and cursed my child. Her face twisted. I was angry. I wasn't thinking. You were thinking. You always think everything through. You wanted to hurt me, and you succeeded. Now the consequences have caught up. That's justice. Justice. Her voice became hysterical. Is it justice that I lost everything? My home, my business, my reputation? That I spent a year in hell where I was treated like a criminal? You were a criminal. You broke the law for years. Because of you, she shouted. Several passers-by turned their heads. It's all because of you. If it weren't for you, Adrian would have married a decent girl. He would have had a good life. Sophie started crying, frightened. I picked her up, held her close. Mrs. Ashford, step away from us. Now. Or what? You'll go to the police again? Ruin my life again? I will protect my daughter by any means necessary. If you don't leave right now, I'm calling the police. She stared at me with a long look, full of hatred and despair. Then she spun around abruptly and shuffled away, hunched, dragging her feet. I stood there, comforting crying Sophie, my hands shaking. This wasn't victory. It was sad necessity. That evening, I told Adrian about the encounter. He went pale. She's looking for us. This is serious. What do you want to do? He was silent for a long time, staring out the window. I need to meet with her. One time. To put a final end to it. The meeting was scheduled for 3 days later at a neutral coffee shop downtown. Adrian insisted I come with him. We left Sophie with my parents. Lorraine was already sitting at a table when we arrived. A cup of cold coffee sat in front of her. She looked up when she saw us. I saw a flash of hope in her eyes. Adrian, my son. We sat across from her. Adrian was tense, hands clenched under the table. Mom, we're here to talk for the last time. The last time. Her voice cracked. Adrian, I'm your mother. You can't just erase me. You erased yourself when you struck my pregnant wife. When you humiliated her for years. When you broke the law. I made a mistake. She reached across the table, trying to touch his fingers. He pulled back. I was blind. I didn't want to lose you. You're my only son. My life. When you chose her. I chose love, Adrian said. I chose honesty. I chose a person who doesn't manipulate, doesn't lie, who treats people with respect. Lorraine looked at me. You turned him against me. No, I replied calmly. You turned him against yourself with your actions. I have nowhere to live. Her voice became pitiful. No money. All my assets were taken. I'm living with Patricia in a cramped apartment, sleeping on a cot. Adrian, help me. You're my son. I will help, he said firmly. I'll transfer you money for rent temporarily. But don't expect me to invite you into our lives. But the granddaughter. I want to see my granddaughter. She's my blood. No. Adrian shook his head. Sophie will not know you. I don't want her growing up under your influence. I don't want her to see how you treat her mother. I don't want you to poison her childhood with your bitterness and manipulation. Lorraine turned white. You're depriving me of my grandchild. You deprived yourself, Adrian said. The moment you struck my pregnant wife and cursed my child. Do you remember those words, Mom? I do. They're burned into my memory. I will never forgive you for them. I was angry. I wasn't in control. An adult is responsible for their words and actions. You controlled me my entire life. But now, for the first time, the control is mine. And I choose my family, my wife, my daughter. You will forever remain in the past. Lorraine covered her face with her hands. Her shoulders shook, but I felt no pity. She was crying over lost control, lost power, not over the pain she'd caused. Mom, I'll transfer you $4,000. Adrian stood. That covers a few months' rent. After that, you're on your own. Find a job. Rebuild your life. But without us. Goodbye. He took my hand. We walked toward the exit. Adrian. Son, please. Lorraine called out. But he didn't look back. Outside, he hugged me tightly. It's over. His voice was hoarse. I'm free. We're free, I corrected. He kissed my temple. Thank you for being stronger than me. Thank you for protecting us. Another year passed. Sophie grew into a true little personality. Talkative, funny, curious. She loved books, drawing, dancing. We enrolled her in a children's development center where she played with other kids. Adrian received another promotion. Deputy Director of the Design Bureau. His salary increased significantly. We continued saving, living modestly, but we could see the light at the end of the tunnel. I returned to the office part-time. Sophie went to preschool in the mornings. It was good for her. She became more social, made her first friends. My parents were thrilled watching their granddaughter grow. Dad taught her to count to 10. Mom read her bedtime stories. We gathered often on weekends and holidays. Our small, strong family. We didn't hear from Lorraine again. Aunt Patricia stopped calling after that coffee shop meeting. Sometimes I wondered how my mother-in-law was doing, but they were fleeting thoughts. No regret. 6 months later, we finally saved enough for a down payment. We started looking for an apartment to buy. We viewed dozens. Wrong neighborhood, bad layout, inflated price. Finally, we found it. A 2-bedroom condo in a new development on the outskirts. Not luxury, not downtown, but bright, warm, with good amenities nearby. School, preschool, park. Perfect for a family with a child. We took out a mortgage. High interest rate, but we'd manage. We signed papers, got keys. The day we moved in was one of the happiest of my life. Bare walls, empty rooms, smell of new construction. But it was ours. Honestly earned. Owing nothing to anyone. Mom, this is our home. Sophie ran through the empty apartment, her voice echoing. Yes, sweetie. Our home. Adrian hugged me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. We did it. We did. We did renovations ourselves. Weekends, evenings after work. Painted walls, hung wallpaper, assembled furniture. Exhausting, but good exhaustion. The exhaustion of working for our own future. My parents helped. Dad installed crown molding. Mom sewed curtains. We bought simple furniture. Not chasing brands. Functionality and comfort were priorities. 3 months later, renovations were complete. We hosted a housewarming party. Friends, colleagues, neighbors. Modest but plentiful spread. Homemade salads, roasted chicken, vegetables, fruit. Sophie helped arrange plates, feeling important. To our home, Adrian raised his glass. To our family, I added. For going through difficulties and becoming stronger. We clinked glasses. I looked at him, at our daughter, at our humble but beloved home. I felt absolute happiness. 2 more years passed. Sophie turned 5. She started kindergarten prep. Learning to read, count, draw. Talented, smart girl. Teachers praised her, said she grasped everything quickly. We continued working, paying down the mortgage. We weren't rich, but we were stable. We could afford a vacation once a year. Usually rented a beach house, spent 2 weeks by the ocean. Sophie loved the sea. She'd spend hours building sand castles, collecting shells. Adrian became director of the design bureau. His career soared. Result of hard work, talent, persistence. Not his mother's connections or family wealth. His own merit. I got promoted at my company. Managing a small department now. My salary increased. We even started making extra mortgage payments to close it faster. One day, walking in the park with Sophie, she asked, Mom, why don't I have a grandma on Daddy's side? Lily at preschool has 2 grandmas. I looked at Adrian. We knew this question would come eventually. Daddy had a mother, Adrian said gently. But she wasn't a very nice person. She hurt your mother. We decided it was better if she wasn't part of our family. Was she mean? She did bad things and didn't want to admit she was wrong. Sophie pondered this. Okay, at least I have Grandma Linda and Grandpa Robert. They're nice. Yes, sweetie. They love you very much. I love them too. She ran off toward the swings, already forgotten the question. Children move on quickly. Adrian took my hand. Do you think we did the right thing? Depriving her of a grandmother. We didn't deprive her. Your mother deprived herself of a granddaughter. And yes, we did right. Sophie's growing up in a healthy environment. No toxicity, no humiliation. Isn't that what matters most? It is, he agreed. We stood watching our daughter swing and laugh, waving to us. The sun was setting, painting the sky in pink and gold. Quiet, peaceful, harmonious. You know, I said, when I first met your mother, she looked at me like I was dirt. She said I wasn't worthy of you, that I had no future, that our child would be worthless. Now look, we own our own home. We have good jobs, a wonderful daughter. We're happy. And she lost everything by clinging to wealth and status. Karma, Adrian chuckled. Not karma. Consequences of choices. Your mother chose money, power, control. We chose love, honesty, dignity. And here we are. He kissed the top of my head. I'm so proud of you. You're the strongest woman I know. I'm not strong. I just refuse to let anyone make me a victim. That evening, after Sophie was asleep, Adrian and I sat on the balcony, sipping tea, wrapped in warm blankets. We talked about the future. Plans. Dreams. I want us to give Sophie a good education, Adrian said. Not necessarily elite, but quality. So she has options. She will. That's what we work for. And I want us to teach her the most important thing. That character, honesty, dignity. That's what makes a person. Not money. We'll teach her by example. We were silent, looking at city lights. Sometimes I wonder, Adrian whispered. If you hadn't found those documents, hadn't filed the complaint, what would have happened? Your mother would have kept poisoning our lives. You would have kept being torn between us. Sophie would have grown up in constant conflict. Do you regret what you did? No. I'm grateful I had the courage to break that toxic cycle. I was terrified, Adrian. But I was more afraid that our daughter would grow up thinking humiliation is normal. That you have to tolerate toxic people just because they're family. I wanted to show her a different example. Adrian took my hand, lacing his fingers through mine. And you did. She sees us living honestly, with dignity, respecting each other. That's the best lesson we can give her. Several more years passed. Sophie became a teenager. Smart, independent, with strong self-worth. She knew the value of honesty. She knew to respect herself and not let anyone cross her boundaries. One day, coming home from school, she asked, "Mom, what really happened to Dad's mother? Why have we never seen her?" I took a deep breath. I knew this conversation was inevitable. "Sit down, Sophie. I'll tell you." And I told her. Not everything. Didn't want to frighten her with details. But the main points. That her grandmother was cruel. That she humiliated me. Even struck me when I was pregnant. That she broke the law and faced consequences. That her father made a choice in favor of our family. The right choice. Sophie listened intently, then nodded. I understand. You were protecting yourself and me. That's right. She never brought it up again. I looked at Adrian. He smiled. We'd raised a strong daughter who understood that love isn't about tolerating toxicity. That family isn't an obligation to endure humiliation. That dignity matters more than blood ties. Now, many years after that terrible evening, I sometimes remember the moment I stood before my mother-in-law with the envelope in my hands. The moment she collapsed unconscious, seeing proof of her crimes. I feel no guilt, no regret, only satisfaction of having made the right choice. Adrian and I sit on our balcony, drinking tea, watching Sophie walk in the yard with friends. We're an ordinary family. Not rich, not poor. Just happy. You know, I tell my husband, your mother wanted you to marry a wealthy girl from her circle, to have a huge mansion, status, connections. What did you get instead? Love, he answers without hesitation. A family, a home we built ourselves. A daughter growing up healthy and happy. Freedom from toxicity. Self-respect. Do I regret it? Not for a second. He kisses me. I smile. We saved each other. Together, we walked through fire and built a life we're proud to tell our daughter about. Somewhere else, in another city, Lorraine lives on. Lonely. Without wealth. Without power. Without family. She made her choice long ago. She chose money over people. Status over love. Control over respect. And we made a different choice. Sophie runs up to us, laughing, telling us something funny. Adrian puts his arms around both of us. I feel their warmth, their love. I know for certain we won. Justice prevailed. Not fairy tale justice, but real human justice. Where everyone gets what they deserve. Where toxicity is punished and dignity is rewarded. And that's the best ending I could have imagined. Here's what nobody tells you about revenge. It's not always loud. It's not always dramatic. Sometimes the most devastating revenge is simply this: living well. Building a life so honest, so full of love, that it stands as living proof of everything your enemy could never be. Lorraine wanted to destroy me because I didn't fit her world. Because I valued character over currency. Because I dared to love her son without a trust fund or a pedigree. But in the end, she destroyed herself. And I simply held up the mirror.